Every new person that we bring in brings a personality,
Mhm.
brings a set of experiences. So we do our very best to vet against first those core principles, those core values, truth, compassion, and service. And we do our very best to be explicitly candid and transparent about who we are, how we work, who we serve.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by OneAccord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, welcome, Jesse, and welcome everyone to another edition of the Value Factory Podcast. Today, we're joined by Jesse Kroon, a OneAccord principal, a consultant that works with many of our clients and even does a lot of work internally in the space of operations, which we will unpack and go deeper into. But Jesse, we'll start if you would please just let our watchers and listeners know a little bit about you and your background, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, like you said, I'm an operations guy. I have always been the kind of person that looks at ways to improve whatever I'm doing. And throughout all of my corporate experience and all of my any kind of work experience, that's just the filter that I put things on, trying to find ways to make things easier and better and more streamlined, save people time, save people energy. And so I've done that, through my corporate experience in both healthcare and technology. I've done it with real estate, with some investors, with some property management companies, with some realtors. I've got all kinds of experience in different sectors. Now I'm working with a couple of construction clients, and the whole idea is just simplifying their workflow, trying to make things easier, make it more streamlined, so that both them and their employees can get more done, make it easier for them, and ideally make more money while they're doing it.
All of those things sound delightful. Making life easier, getting more done, and making more money. Isn't it? Is it true in your experience? And I'm saying this from kind of the conversations I think I have, that when we think about making more money, we often think about marketing, advertising, sales, and we think about revenue, raising that top line. How do operations help us make more money?
I mean, first of all, it makes things, well, several ways. So first of all, I think just when you have smooth operations, first of all, your employees are happy. And I think when you have happy employees, you have less turnover. You've got people who are willing to work a lot harder for you. And I think that's just a cost savings, for one thing, is just so you're not dealing with having to hire and constant turnover. But operationally, I think a lot of things are cost savings in the ways that things are handled, because again, if things are running more efficiently, you're able to pare down on the technology that you're using. You're able to save time in the things that you're doing. Maybe you can hire less people because you've got some automated systems that you're using, instead of having to hire somebody to do some of the work that you were planning on hiring for. So a lot of the cost savings is where operations can really dive into. That's probably where I'd go with that, is just to say, hey,
Yeah.
let's save your company some money, and make things easier for everyone.
Well, and as I'm hearing you talk through, it's revenue helps us, sales and marketing helps us make more revenue, generate more revenue. Operations lets us keep more of that revenue that we work so hard to generate. But also a great point, keeping employees happy. I know personally that clunky operations, lacking systems, not having clear kind of SOPs, standard operating procedures, create inefficiencies, but they
Mhm.
also create frustration. And
Absolutely.
it's like, hey, if it's so hard to get this done here, I wonder how green the grass is on the other side. Maybe those guys, maybe our competition, they've figured something out. It's easier. It's not as difficult to get work done. And as an employee, I'm thinking, well, why do I want to work extra hard to do the same thing for conceptually the same amount of money and whatnot? So yeah, those operational considerations for employee retention.
Yeah, and I think too often, the leadership of the company kind of sets a direction or sets the standard operating procedure, but they're not the one doing the work. And so it
Yeah.
filters down to the employee level, and they're looking at the system and they're saying, "Why are we doing it that way? That is wasting me time. That's so frustrating to have to deal with this." and they already know how to solve the problem. It's just that the leadership isn't listening, or it isn't, being involved, letting them be involved in solving the problem there.
Yeah, I'm a lot of times what I like to do in the value factory conversation is use OneAccord and use myself as a case study, as an example. So let's go there a little bit. And I do this for the purpose that I can tell an actual story, I can share the frustration, and I just believe that folks that are entrepreneurs, owners, founders, running companies, they can see themselves in the story that I share, or maybe our advisor network can imagine their client in the story that I share. So here we are. Okay. This snapshot in time. We have about 30 employees, or 30, folks on the team, not employees, but principals and consultants, and right. But just, let's let that translate over to a company that's got 30 FTE, let's call it. We've been around for 25 years. There are a lot of things that we've done over the years, and many of them have been documented, but they've been documented, let's say, disjointed, right? Like there wasn't a single source of truth, right? And so these processes, these procedures would kind of leave with the person, or end when the person who developed it, created it, owned it, left the organization. And in 25 years, we've had hundreds of people in and out of OneAccord,
Right.
and many of them with great ideas that launch an initiative and they drive it, and then they're gone and it's gone. And as owner, my fear is, if I put all of this, I don't know, faith is a word, trust, responsibility in a person, and then they leave, like that starts to hurt. And it, you're once bitten, twice shy, third time never again. So diagnose me, fix me, Jesse.
And I think you're talking about standard operating procedures and policy documents and things that are written down, and you think of how that makes a company more valuable, because then somebody can step in and do that work again. And you really want that consistency, because consistency is what builds brands. If your customers are getting the same experience now as they are, with a different person on the team, that's consistent. You want to make sure you're building that consistency, because that's why people keep coming back, because they know what kind of experience they're going to get. And I think the challenge sometimes with that is when you're hiring, well-qualified people who know what they're doing already, sometimes it is challenging to have them look at an SOP and say, okay, you're going to follow this process, even though you've done it for 20, 25 years in a different way, and so sometimes there's a disjointed piece there where you want that consistency, but so maybe you're not writing SOPs, now you're writing policies, and you're saying, here's how we think about things. Here's how we, in general, here's some principles that we abide by, even though how you get to the results might be a different way, right? And you have to kind of play that out depending on the organization that you're working with.
Okay, so you've brought in some nuance here that I think is important, and they're two P's, but they're very different.
Absolutely.
Policy versus procedure.
Yep. Well, policy versus what was the word I just used? Not procedure, but I
was thinking SOP, right? Like there's the policy, and as you said that, I'm imagining, okay, policy, guardrails. You can do kind of whatever you want inside these guardrails.
Yeah.
Procedures would be prescriptive, as in, this is how you do the thing. Absent guardrails, it's like, this is how you do it.
Right.
So,
and principle was the other word that I used, saying, we've got these guiding principles to say, we always want to treat people with respect. We always want to teach, we want, here's the common way that we're going to act, and here's kind of what we're looking at. So that'd be kind of a,
let's put this, if I'm just kind of working through this mentally with you, I'm thinking of a hierarchical structure where we've got our principles. I might say our core values, or our guiding core values. And then we've got policies, and then we've got procedures. And so if I take this on at OneAccord, our core values are truth, compassion, and service. So I would love to believe that I could just say to 30 people, in truth, say the truth, do the truth, right? Clear? Everybody have the same meaning of truth? Okay, let's just put a pin in that one. But truth, compassion, let's all be compassionate, right? and service. Let's act in service. If everybody tells the truth with compassion and shows up with a heart to serve, we're not going to fail. And yet we all have our different definitions and different ways of displaying compassion, are different from our lived experience and our personal values and our family and, community, what it means to be truthful and deliver truth, right? And what it means to serve. So, okay, we've got these guiding principles. Now let's come into policy, right? So, one of our policies might be that we always document our scope of work so that we have laid out exactly what our deliverables will be. And those scope of works must be signed, and we must collect payment from our client before we start an engagement. So there's a policy, right? That doesn't say what words can and can't be in that scope of work.
Correct.
It doesn't prescribe those things. So then procedurally, we have a document that is our template that says, do this, don't do that, put this here, don't put that here.
And here's dots of where you find the button, and here's the login information, and, the very, very detailed, list of here's your literal to-do list.
Yeah. And what I would love, and here's some philosophy I'm kind of working through, is like directionally, those guiding principles, they have to be super clear. And our policies must be clear and very simple, like easy to follow, easy to understand. We cannot go deep into nuance. And I'm just going to push back on that as much as I can, because if we go from 30 to 60 to 100 people, the more intricate our policies and our procedures get. You finished my sentence there. You said, yep. What happens?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're dealing with compliance like crazy. And, now you're micromanaging. Again, you're hiring people who know what they're doing. And especially at OneAccord, you're hiring professionals that know how to get the job done already. And they already know, they know how to work with a client. They know how to get the results with the client that they want. So maybe your policies are stepping back to say, okay, well, our policies say that we have to have a statement of work on file. We have to have payment before we start work. We have to have signatures. We've got, here's the things that we have to have. And here's the guardrails that we're setting up to say, okay, this is what we have to have. How you do the actual engagement is going to be up to you. How you actually interact with the client, and get the results that you want. But we've got these set standards that we're saying, hey, this is what OneAccord is. This is what we're going to stand behind. That, when we work with a client, they know that it's going to be clear what that statement of work is. They know that they're going to have a quarterly meeting with, with the leadership of the company to have, whatever those standards are. Here's the checkpoints that we're going to have, that every engagement is going to have the same guardrails there.
And I'd like to think that, for the senior folks, and for everybody, we can start top down on that hierarchy, right? So we've got our core values, then we've got some policies, and then we've got procedures, right? We can go into the weeds as much as someone needs us to. But then I think if we hired somebody, entry level, like a junior consultant, never been in the business, then we would start really with the procedures and work our way up. So we're saying, here on day one, you don't need to know. I mean, I'll just say it kind of little hyperbolically here, right? You don't need to know what you're doing. Just come in and follow the procedures. And as you follow the procedures, that will help the policies make sense, and those policies make sense in the context of these guiding principles.
Yeah.
So it kind of, works up and down. So now I got a new one for you. Here, help me solve this problem. Every new person that we bring in brings a personality, brings a set of experiences. So we do our very best to vet against first those core principles, those core values: truth, compassion, and service. And we do our very best to be explicitly candid and transparent about who we are, how we work, who we serve. I say often, if someone is interested to come work with us, my first instinct is to tell them all the reasons not to, right? I want to kind of push away those who might be interested in, so that, I don't know, just so we've got the really right fit. Okay. So let's say we bring in awesome consultant. They've got 30 years of being a CEO and startup CEO, and they've gone through 3 exits, and they could step into a dozen of our client engagements today and add value. like that. They bring in hey, we should try this. We should do this. Here's a new idea. Here's a thing. Have you heard of this? And I love new ideas and innovation. And at some days I'm like, I can't handle any more ideas. Yeah, take another, I almost wonder if we should have like a suggestion box and fill out the form and put it in there and like how. So the question I think is the balance of doing the thing consistently, repetitively, building the brand, and then here's a new idea. Where does that fit in?
And I think if you're talking processes, then you're still building your brand because the end result is going to be consistent, just better implemented. So you're finding people who, through your interview process, you're finding people who are bought into the mission of what you're doing. They're already bought into, here's where we're going as a company, right? And so if their ideas are, hey, let's go out here and do something that's completely unrelated to our company, well, why are we having that conversation? We're already clear. We've already got a strategic vision for where our company is going to go and what we're about and all that kind of stuff, right? And so as long as their ideas are within this scope and saying, hey, if we're just trying to do what we do better, trying to give better results to our clients, trying to operationally do better, whatever that looks like, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. Maybe now is not the time, but those ideas can be welcome, can be vetted, can be, as long as they're within here's who we are as a company.
Filter, great litmus test. And, as it is, given where we're at in the maturity of the organization, I am absolutely ready to delegate the responsibilities, the operational responsibilities of the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it sounds exciting, right? It's a bit frightening because how we deliver is dare I say, the most important thing that we do, right? Doing a good job for our clients. Because, we can market the heck out of everything that we do, but if we fail on delivery time and time again, our
Right.
brand, right? So the operational element of the business, on some level, it's like, hey, Jesse, here's my baby. Take good care of it, raise it just the way I would. But that's the idea here. How do you step into that role for the owner founder that is reaching that point of maturity where they can't do everything and they need some relief, and they've decided that, operations is an area of the company that I'm comfortable bringing in some support for?
Maybe not even comfortable, but it's just necessary, right? Because it's not your skill set. And I'm not speaking to you. I'm just saying, owner founder, it's not their skill set, but it's a loss of control because, at least when you're doing it, what you're doing, you're intimately involved in everything. And as soon as you let go and kind of say, okay, I'm letting go of some of this control, might not get the results that I want. So there's an area of trust there that you have to kind of say, okay, well, let's see what happens. If you're hiring well, the person that you're bringing in is going to do a better job than you, because they're the experts, and you've got to trust the people that you're working with. Otherwise, there's no reason to hire them. If you don't trust them, then don't waste your time.
And so in that, I give the recommendation. I am a proponent of, and not only am I the president, but I'm also a member. Remember the Hair Club for Men commercials?
Yeah, right.
Obviously not not buying that product, but the message there is that we take the medicine that we prescribe, and so my first kind of step into delegating and this is the way I say it, delegating my authority to someone else in the space of operations is to say, hey, Jesse, I'd like to bring you on as a fractional and perhaps even interim operations leader. I've never had anyone in this role. It's always been me. I don't know what I actually want. I just know that I need help. And yeah, maybe I'm uncomfortable, but I'm comfortable enough to say, let's start this on a fractional. So part-time, whatever that looks like. Here's a scope of work. Here are the things that are very important that I just am finding I don't have capacity for. And let's try this out.
And I think you work together for a while, and you're through that handoff process, I don't know everything about the company, and so then, we're meeting together and you're filling me in. Oh yeah, we tried that a couple years ago and we struggled because of this. And here's some nuance of the company or our clients that you're not aware of yet. Right. But that communication goes back and forth just to continue to build into, here's where this role is going. Here's the expectations of the role, but giving somebody freedom to then make the changes necessary when they see something.
Yeah, I think we could, you and I could bring my, the whole leadership team of OneAccord together, and we could write out a job description and roles and responsibilities for, let's call it, a chief operating officer.
Mhm.
And we could set, here's all the things that we want. And then we could go hire someone full-time, B2, whatever that salary is. And we could find out 3 weeks in that, yeah, the job description that we wrote is not actually what we need, because this person with experience has come in and they've identified things that we didn't know. And 3 months in, 6 months in, new things emerge that we didn't anticipate. And because I've never had someone in this role before, I
Mhm.
don't know exactly what I want from them and how they show up and so forth. And so I've hired someone based on a job description that I wrote, and they were perfectly qualified for that. They've been on the job 6 months. I've now decided that, yeah, what I was imagining isn't really what we need. Turns out we need, a chief operating officer that has a little bit more technology, acumen, because we're leaning that way and directionally we're going that way in the company. And I didn't really acknowledge that in the hiring process. And gosh, now I've got a full-time W-2 employee that's, what do I do? What do I do with this person?
Mhm.
And so that's the argument that I make for this interim and fractional as companies are growing and evolving.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think
Yeah. I love that model, because it helps you figure things out, especially if especially through the fractional model, you're generally hiring a seasoned, experienced person to fill that role who's seen several different companies, who's seen several different ways to do it, can step in and be the expert in multiple modalities of doing it, and kind of can say, okay, well, in this case, here's why I would recommend this, and you get 6 months, a year and a half of time with this person to implement their changes. And now you can be ready for, a full-time employee now that the role is set, now that, the company is a little bit more established.
that's the hypothesis. That's the working theory that I think makes the most sense. And candidly, I've not seen an argument against, or, some competing, well, here's a better way to approach it than that.
Mhm.
So, Jesse, tell us about, some of the work. Like, let's go into the details about the work that you do, maybe the thing that you love doing the most,
Yeah.
the biggest problem or solution that you've brought into, tell us some stories, man.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm brought into companies things just aren't working great, or things are just seem inefficient. And so it just starts with a conversation. We'll kind of look at what processes they're having problems with, and say, okay, let's narrow down on what the fires are that you're dealing with. What are the inefficiencies? Where is your staff frustrated? And what's taking longer than it should? Questions like that is the type of process that I'll usually start with, and just kind of, and it'll always start with a conversation of, how are things going now? Talk me through the process now. And I'll document, like, do this, you follow this process, and I try not to judge, just because every company has their own reason for why things grew up that way. And they've got perfectly good reasons of why they do it one way rather than another. And maybe it's just that they don't know better. But, the goal is just to document what they're doing and kind of look at it from a critical perspective, and just find out every intricacy of that process to say, here's step by step, here's how they handle this situation. And then from there, I'm recommending upgrades. And, from my experience, I'm saying, okay, well, you've got this system that you're not using completely. Let's teach you this new process. Let's, whatever that upgrade looks like. And then I'll work with the company to actually upgrade those processes all the way through compliance, working with training their employees, and then the compliance side of it as well, following through weeks and months later to make sure employees are actually on board and following the new process the way that it was laid out. Um, So that's kind of how I work right now. What I'm finding is that one of the biggest things that I see that companies don't do very well is that they will pay a lot of money for a project management system or some kind of technology, and they won't fully implement it. They will, you think of like a CRM where most of the CRMs, HubSpot, what are the other ones? Anyway, you pick HubSpot and a company knows how to enter a contact. And so now they are entering contacts, and that's the only thing that they know about the CRM. And so now they're using 5% of what that CRM can do. And then over here on another side, they're keeping an Excel document of when they last contacted the people, and when they're meeting with them, and they're now going to their Outlook and emailing them through Outlook, and they're using a calendar to mark their appointments that they've got with all of their contacts. And so it's really inefficient to go through 3 different softwares to try to track one single client. Versus if you really look at, HubSpot, we'll just use that as an example, it's designed to do all of that for you. And if you really look at all of the functions and the features, now suddenly you can build in you're tracking your clients, you're putting them on a drip campaign so that they're getting regular communication from you that looks like it's targeted directly to them. So instead of just newsletters, you're also sending an email once every 6 months that says, hey, just checking in on you. Is there anything we can do to help you? Whatever that looks like, and make it sound personal so that it looks like it's a direct email from me, but it didn't take any time from me. I can set my meetings through HubSpot. I can do social media through HubSpot, and all of these tools that I'm wasting time on out here, I can now put into HubSpot. And HubSpot's just an example. I'm working with a
But it's
couple
a
of
great
construction
example.
clients right now. The same thing. They've got a project management system that they're just using 5% of the system. So we're looking at, what does it look like to just fully buy into the system? Let's get your templates set up so that when you start a project, all of the to-dos are already built in there. You don't have to then recreate the project every time. You can just save your staff energy, and it gets better results because now you're sure that you did that checkoff list, and you're sure you followed that template right, and everything's built in there because you took the time up front on the setup.
Why don't the firms use the other 95%? What's the block?
I think it's just people get so busy. I think, the busyness of the urgent day to day gets in the way. I think, when you buy a technology, you're promised certain things, and you're like, oh, that's going to be so cool to have a working CRM that does all this stuff. So you buy it, but now suddenly I don't have time to figure out how to make this work. I don't have time to really fuss with it and do it. And so then here we are 6 months later, and it's never happened. And so that's where somebody like me steps in, and I'm able to say, let me go set your system up. Just pay me for a few months just to help you implement your system, get everything set up, make sure it's working right. And then maybe after that, I'm just, working for you a couple hours a month, just making sure that the system continues to perform and we can continue to make the tweaks that you need. But I think it's just the urgent.
So there's a big piece of that is the setup, getting it set up right.
Yes. Yeah, correct. And it takes time.
It takes time. I think in my own experience, this is a largely underestimated, very important component is the setup. And I say that in my experience working in large corporate, as companies that I work with implement new CRM or try to, drive more usage of CRM. Something we talked about earlier is that we have kind of this top down, here's how you're going to do it, without collecting the data from the users.
Absolutely.
To say like, what are you doing today? What are you doing today? Well, I send emails through Outlook. I have the calendar appointment through, Microsoft Teams or the, Office 365. I have this Excel spreadsheet over here where I track contacts, and survey really all of those people who have the highest probability of being the most engaged users, right? That takes a lot of time. And then it's the architecture of how each firm is going to use the software
Absolutely.
uniquely.
Yeah.
So,
And getting a wish list of what they want, like what is something that you would want from a CRM that you currently don't have visibility on? Like what would you want if you were thinking of all of your clients? What's something that you want? Because sometimes it's built into the system, and again, they just haven't taken time to figure that out.
Just about everything that I want to do exists as a feature or function in our CRM.
Yep.
Now, I want all kinds of stuff because my mind is going everywhere and I'm thinking about opportunities and ways we can do better. And like this, my, 24/7, my thoughts are on the business and how we do better.
Mhm.
For the 30 folks that work with us, their minds are not 24/7 on how to do the business better. Their minds are on how do I serve my client?
Mhm.
How do I engage new prospects? How do I win new business? They're thinking about their own kind of business within the business, let's say. And so this goes back to even those guiding principles, the policies, the procedures. I am like adamant that whatever we create has to be so simple
Mhm.
that we can have it on a one-page document. Here's how you get this thing done.
Yeah.
Okay. So we architect the system, we take in the feedback from the users, we have it simplified, it's beautiful, it's turnkey, it's intuitive,
Mhm.
it's all plugged in, all the APIs are working. Not everybody uses it.
I and I think that's an implementation issue. And there's a couple of reasons why sometimes I find hesitancy in the buy-in is, first of all, people don't see the need to change, because change takes energy and takes time, but the end user might not see the benefit, first of all, of just like, okay, why should I change? Because what I was doing was working, and so sometimes we've got to talk with that person individually and just chat with them and say, hey, what's the hesitancy? Is it just time that you don't have time? Is it energy, training? What is it that we need to do to unlock your hesitancy, and make sure that you are willing to step in. Um, and then sometimes I think that the reason people don't buy in is, especially if you're building in new technology, right? If I'm as a consultant stepping in and saying, okay, well, we're just going to throw away this old system and start you with a new system from scratch, that hurdle's a lot bigger than to step in and say, no, we're going to still use the old system. Let's just add a feature. You're already familiar with how to use HubSpot. We're not going to get rid of HubSpot and bring in a brand new system that you've never seen before. Now you have to learn how to use it, import contacts, and do all this work to try to. That's a huge hurdle. Let's just look at HubSpot and say, hey, would you mind in this field over here, would you just put this, would you make sure you fill out that field? Oh, yeah, that takes 2 seconds, and so I think that hesitancy is too often, again, it's just that top down, hey, we're forcing this on you rather than helping them see the benefit of, this is going to help you. It's going to help the organization. If we've got people that are really bought into the organization, then, okay, I might not like the change, but I can at least accept it.
Yeah.
And I can.
Who moved my cheese?
Right.
Okay, so there's some elements here. I want to go into the notion of compliance, just have a conversation about that. And if we just sequentially, we select the CRM system that we think is going to be the best for us. And the sales rep did a great job of telling us we're going to double our revenues because we bought their system. We've got all the feedback from the power users. We've architected it. It's laid out exactly the way that we think is going to be the most effective.
I think in that step too, I would go to those people who are hesitant in that step, because you already know who the people are that are, entrenched in their ways. And so through that step of even fact finding, I'd be going to them saying, hey, we haven't made any decisions yet, but we're looking at our CRM usage. Let's have a conversation about how do you use it? What do you want out of your system? Because if you bring them into the conversation, now they've had a voice in the conversation as well. And that unlocks some of that hesitancy as well.
So we end up in this place where we've got a beautiful new project management system, CRM system, ERP, like, pick a description. Let's just say the word compliance. How do we do compliance? What does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, compliance always has to start with training, and you've got to make sure that your staff know and understand the system. Like you can't just say, okay, now we're in a new CRM, start using it, right? Like, okay, we have to do some training so they know what our expectations of the usage is. and so that they know, here's the fields that we're asking you to fill in, here's the expectations, right? And I think that's a big part of it, is just making sure that they do understand and have that frank conversation, because to be honest, so often we're not very good at communication. We think that we've communicated well enough, but really the end user doesn't totally understand, or the handoff wasn't very clear, and it's just this muddy whatever. So training comes first. And then from there, it's just kind of working with them. And like, you've got the metrics that you're checking, and, like, okay, so now I'm going to go into the CRM or into the project management system, and just like, okay, I'm going to go spot check. And a couple weeks later, just, hey, let's see if it's being used the way I'm expecting it to. Let's have a meeting just to talk about problems, and bring people into the room together and just say, hey, we've been in this new system for a couple weeks now. What do you think? What problems are you seeing when you're using it? Again, getting that feedback from the people that are doing the work, because they're the ones that understand why something's not as efficient as the old system, or why it's not working as well. But again, letting them have that voice helps with that compliance. And then regularly monitoring it, through time, until you feel like you've got the compliance that you're expecting. And it could take months, before you're really buying into it.
It does. And the larger the organization, the higher the real number of non-compliant participants. If we've got 4 people and 25% are non-compliant, well, that's one person. Well, if we've got 100 people and you got 25 people that are not complying, then we end up in kind of a mess. So trying to improve that, the percentage of compliance is predicated on buy-in and training, ease of use, simplicity. Our conversation started with an operational organization that is unclear, clunky, challenging, creates frustrated employees, especially if you then layer on compliance, right? Like, we expect that you're going to do this every time. And if this is really difficult, it's opaque, it's not clear, it's not intuitive, then we're going to end up with either non-compliance or people leaving, right?
Yeah. And I think that ease of use, like when I'm looking at solutions, I'm always trying to look at it from the end user's perspective. Like, what is going to lead them to do the correct thing to fill in that field, rather than just have them remember it? Is there a way that I can have that screen pop up to remind them? That's a weird example, but how can I kind of get them to automatically do it because there's, a notification or a reminder, or a template that they have to use, or something like that, rather than just relying on memory? That's a lot less likely to be successful.
Yeah, one of the ways that we've configured systems internally is to make certain fields required and other fields optional. And so then we just have to find that balance, that those required fields, they had better be used.
Yeah.
I'm not going to require someone to go find the PO box mailing address for the corporate office of the company that they work for to fill in a required field if I'm never going to use that. But if we intend to do direct mail campaigns as a part of our ongoing marketing initiatives, and I need mailing addresses, then I would make that a required field. I would explain to those and provide training, but that requirement would then be a tool for compliance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this kind of stuff that we're talking about both encourages, and I dare I say even excites me, because efficiency is exciting to me. Getting better at delivery excites me. Strengthening or deepening the value of our brand, those things excite me. Providing tools for our team that help them be successful, those things legitimately excite me. Like, I have energy to lean into this work. So I appreciate having the conversation. I hope that through our conversation, anyone that's listening might have had an idea. There might have been a light bulb turned on of, hey, I should look at this, or I should do this in my company, or this is worth exploring, or maybe there's a different way to go about whatever it is that we're doing. And for our advisor network, they might know that business owner that would appreciate or benefit from a conversation around, well, how do we start to take some of those operational, the know-how out of their head and put it onto paper, and then, operationalize that.
Yeah, and systematizing. You get consistency. You get, a better result.
Awesome. Well, I guess I would say, as we're kind of wrapping up here, offer you the closing thoughts if you have any, or uh, words of wisdom, or anything that you'd like to leave our audience with, Jesse.
I guess I would just say I may be weird for liking operations, but at the end of the day, like I said, is I love it when people come to me and just I was able to make their job easier because of something that I did. And they can go home and they're less frustrated with their job. Their result was better. Things are more streamlined. And I just love hearing the feedback from people that are like, wow, that was a great change. And I'm glad that glad feature now, or that that change was made.
Awesome. Well, I can tell you, firsthand, I've had that experience with some of the work that you've done inside of OneAccord. So thank you. Appreciate you. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in to another conversation in the Value Factory. Our focus here is really to provide insights, thought leadership to owners, founders, entrepreneurs that are looking to increase the enterprise value of their company, make their company run more efficiently, generate more revenue, keep more of those revenue dollars that they've generated. And so I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll